Bureaucracy, implementation of policy. So, like I said, the president it can't enforce or implement or carry out all of the laws that Congress writes. So he has the bureaucracy do it for him. This is one of the last steps in the policy life cycle. Okay, now the first part of the policy life cycle requires people to contact their Congress members or Congress members looking at public opinion polls and saying, we have a problem in the United States. We need to make sure that people have health care. People are going broke. Okay, then they formulate the policy, which that's the whole how a bill becomes a law process. It's marked up in committee. They have hearings. Okay, a bill goes through one house and then through another, and then it's adopted. That means the president signs it, and then appropriations committee gives money to this program. So with healthcare, we wrote the Affordable Health Care Act. Policy adoption, the president signs it and he starts to roll it out. The implementation would be the actual process of putting the law into practice. So with the Affordable Health Care Act, that is the part of the process where the federal government had to create a website that people could go to buy insurance. If part of the policy formulation was to mandate that everybody had to have health care insurance, then that had to be implemented, and the federal government made exchanges for that. So you could go to the website and find places to buy insurance. Now, evaluation, how well does it work? Well, the Affordable Health Care Act had a very poor evaluation. So what we're going to be focusing on, however, in this step of the the public policy process, is right here, policy implementation, that carrying out of the policy that was created by Congress and signed by the president. So, first, policy. Again, this is a choice that the government makes in response to a political issue. A policy is a course of action taken with regard to some problem. Okay, so please understand that definition of policy. It's a course of action taken to solve a problem. So what is the government's course of action to solve people going broke, providing themselves with health care? Affordable Health Care Act. The definition of policy implementation, it's the stage of policy making between the establishment of the policy and the evaluation of the policy. It's the in-between, the passing of law and the law affecting us. You can refer to the policy life cycle where that is. There are three elements to implementing policy. The first element is the agency responsible. So agency responsibility. Sometimes you have to create a new agency or add a new responsibility to an old agency. In the case of the Affordable Health Care Act, we did not have to add a new agency. We already had the Health and Human Services Cabinet Department led by Secretary Kathleen Sebelius. All right, so we didn't have to add one, but we gave a new responsibility to an existing agency. Operational rule. Okay, this is your policy goals turned into rules and guidelines for making the policy into an action. We're going to get into operational rules with more details. So the rules and guidelines for making policy actually affect us. Okay, and the third element is getting the right people coordinated to the right resources. And that failed with the Affordable Health Care Act. We were unable to get the right people on board. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just got a text. That's tacky. Anyway, but getting the right people, enough money to implement a law. So getting the right web designers on board with the Affordable Health Care Act to make a website that actually works. Okay. Steps of the implementation process. These guys, that's two of the 9/11 hijackers caught on airport surveillance video before they got on planes. This is a line at the DMV. Okay, so the steps of the implementation process. You have the administrative routine. So the administrative routine is, what do the people who have to administer this policy, what do they do? What's their day in and day out operations? When they go to work, what's their routine? Standard operating procedures is a part of their daily routine. SOPs. SOPs are the procedures used by bureaucrats to bring clarity to the implementation process. So basically, what happens? Congress writes a law. In that law, even though it might be 800 to 1,000 pages, Congress does not write all of the details into that law. They are not going to tell somebody who does this job on a daily basis how to do their job. So the administrators have to establish a standard operating procedure. We're told as teachers by central office that we have to teach you. We're told what to teach you. We're told when to teach you. And we're told at the end how they're going to measure our success. But what happens in my classroom, the routine that we do on a daily basis, the fact that I'm recording these notes for you, the fact that you turn your papers into me on Google Docs, whatever, those are my operating procedures. Those are how I carry out the learning in my classroom. Central office doesn't tell me specifically how to do it. I have that power. So do bureaucrats. So bureaucrats have the ability to create the procedures that they use on a daily basis to carry out policy. Now, this allows them a lot of legislative power. They take laws and they make the details of how those laws would be carried out. All right, so this adds a lot. That's why those asterisks are the asterisks. Yes, asterisks. That's why they're there, because that's an important part of their job. It also allows them, SOPs allow them uniformity in the face of complexity. It helps them make numerous everyday decisions fairly and in a timely manner. It makes personnel able to go from one job to the next without a lot of confusion. All right, so if you have some typical SOPs for the DMV, anybody could walk up to that DMV window who is a DMV clerk and do that job. Now that also, the SOPs create the idea of red tape. Red tape are those things that you have to, is the stuff that you have to get through, those hoops that you have to jump through in order to get something from the federal government. So if you want to get a tax return, you have to file your taxes. Right? If you want to get veterans benefits, you have to fill out paperwork. The paperwork is the red tape. Now there are SOPs in place, and some of them aren't that great. For example, the SOPs for hijackings before 9/11. Before 9/11, the standard operating procedures if a plane had been hijacked. The Federal Aviation Administration assumes that the pilot of the hijacked plane will notify an air traffic controller because they assume that the hijackers don't know how to fly a plane themselves and need the pilot alive. Now, that was a bad assumption. That was a bad standard operating procedure. The air traffic controller then is supposed to notify the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD. All right, now with 9/11, none of that worked because the hijackers knew how to fly the plane. They could kill the pilot, and therefore there was nobody contacting the air traffic controllers. So that standard operating procedure fell through. Administrators also have discretion. Now, discretion means decision making. So the choice of decision making. So the administrator, sorry, let me make sure because this is a really big concept. I don't want to screw it up too much. Okay, administrator's level of discretion is the authority of the bureaucrats to select or choose various responses to a given problem. Okay, so it's the authority of the bureaucrats to choose how they're going to respond to a problem. Discretion, the most common form of discretion you could use if you're talking about a government employee, think of the cops. A cop can pull you over for speeding. A cop can use administrative discretion and choose that they're going to respond to you speeding by giving you a warning. Or they can use their administrative discretion by choosing to give you a ticket. Now that's the most basic example of using discretion. But every bureaucrat has discretion. An IRS agent can use discretion by handling your case right away or putting you on the back burner. Somebody from the Social Security Administration can choose to help you right then with your benefits, or they can put you back to the bottom of the line or the bottom of the pile of paperwork. Administrative discretion at its most basic level is greatest when there are not clearly defined rules of how to do the job because Congress didn't write rules for how to do the job. Okay. Congress allows this level of discretion because Congress doesn't have the expertise or knowledge of how to implement a law. Congress also allows this much discretion because they don't necessarily want to be blamed for if a law is poorly implemented. Sometimes Congress allows discretion because it's quicker to compromise on getting a piece of law passed without providing a lot of details. So if you think you're an ICE agent, an immigration and customs enforcement agent, you know you have a job of protecting the border, but Congress didn't write a lot of details of how you do your job. So you do your job the best way you see fit. Maybe you, instead of rounding up 3 or 4 illegal immigrants, you become close with them. You make them informants, and they tell you where more legal immigrants are, and you leave them alone. That's your discretion. Most discretion you're going to find at the street level, people who are street level bureaucrats, like the police or the highway patrol, giving you that example I gave you before. Also, you can find that there is a lot of fragmentation. This fragmentation means that there's responsibility of carrying out a policy distributed amongst several different agencies. And border security is another example of that. You know, border security, you have the Department of Defense, Department of Agriculture, they check the border security of plants coming into this country. CIA, Department of Energy, the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Justice, Department of State, the Postal Service, the Department of Transportation. All of those are responsible in some way, shape, or form for carrying out border security. So that responsibility is broken up into different agencies. So why don't they want to reorganize? Okay. See, the thing is for every government agency you have a congressional committee that's tied to that agency. Department of Agriculture, you have the Congressional Committee on Agriculture. Congressional Committee on Agriculture is never going to agree to get rid of the Department of Agriculture's responsibility over border security. Why? Because they don't want to control their little piece of the pie, and they don't want to lose control of their piece of the pie. So Congress isn't going to reorganize. They want the power over their agency when it comes to border security. And that's where we're going to stop. I'll pick this up in the next part 2.